You're listening to the Wordslinger Podcast, episode 105, Writing Sci-Fi and Fantasy with Maggie Hogarth. This episode of the Wordslinger Podcast is brought to you by the audiobook edition of Quello Medallion. You can find Quello Medallion on Audible and use your Audible credit, or get Quello Medallion for free when you go to audibletrial.com/wordslinger.
It's the Wordslinger Podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Hey everybody, it should come as no surprise to you whatsoever that this is Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger, and you are listening to the Wordslinger Podcast. You probably know that already, but thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. This show gives me an opportunity to talk to you guys every week, and I love that. I will confess, today I am recording the show a little bit late. I'm recording on the day of release, actually, which is something I have tried very hard to stop doing in the past, but occasionally everything catches up with me. But it's been a very busy week, all right? That's my excuse. Actually, it's been a great week. On the draft to digital front, things have been pretty amazing. There's just been a lot of cool stuff happening. I'm kind of shifting our focus, the marketing focus of the company, to a content-driven marketing strategy that I approve of, that I contribute to, of course, but I'm also looking to outsource some of that content contribution, so that's going to be cool. It's fun. The stuff that we're doing is just amazing, and the way that we're helping authors, indie authors, is just, I don't know, it speaks to me. I've come to a realization, not that you don't already know this about me, or, maybe it's just something, I don't know, it soaks in over time, and every now and then it awakens. But I've realized that I really do have this passion for helping people to become authors, and helping indie authors to succeed. I mean, there's just so much that I always take for granted. I always assume people know. And then I'll write something or I'll say something, and people will come to me and thank me for that. And there's this shock, because I'm like, for example, recently, I started using Medium, and if you're not using Medium, I highly recommend trying it out. And Medium it's sort of a blogging platform. I don't like to think of it that way. I don't think they like to think of it that way either. And I'm not reading from their official site or anything, but I can tell you my experience with it. Medium is this platform that allows you to write and produce anything you want. You can actually write anything you like, I think there are probably guidelines on content, and you should be aware of those and stick to those. But if you want to write something that's sort of blog style, blog format, you can. If you want to write something that's a little more article format, magazine and newspaper article format, you can. You can write, short stories. I've seen fiction on the site. So it's a wide open platform to do whatever you like. And what I like about it is, rather than it being this cloistered off blog that you've started on your website, like mine, which was pointed out to me, by the way, in an interview yesterday, has been neglected for quite some time now. And that's because I'm doing all this other stuff. But rather than having this blog that oftentimes is you talking to the wind, with no real feedback or reaction from people, you've got this new environment where suddenly you can see a conversation. You can join a conversation. You can become part of a flow. And rather than comments, people will comment. People still treat, I do, I'm trying to change my habit on this, but people still treat replies, I guess, as comments. But you're actually creating a whole new article when you do that. And you're actually opening up the opportunity for people to join that conversation from your starting point. So it's actually much better to be very conscious and aware, and to write with intention, which is something I tell everyone to do anyway. So I don't know, it's a great platform, and the reason I bring it up is I've been doing a lot more writing on that platform. I'm porting over some blog posts from Draft to Digital, from my personal blog, past articles and things that I've written that are no longer floating around out there, or maybe some of them are. But the point there is I'm out posting new content, and so I'm getting a lot of feedback from people, both on Medium and on Facebook and via email and what have you. And the things that I'm hearing from the author community are surprising sometimes, because they'll tell me. I posted recently, I reposted a blog post from the Draft to Digital blog that is about writing a book description. It's a how-to, and I got so much feedback because I shared this on Facebook in several groups, but I got so much feedback on that and so many questions, just people surprised by it, like they'd never thought about this. And here I'm thinking I'm kind of just preaching to the wind again. I'm putting something out there that everyone already knows. I'm refreshing the memory of the. You could make the point that if I think everyone already knows this, why am I writing about it? But I always try to add something to the conversation, so that's my take. But the things that people comment on are the things that I thought everyone already knew, and that's one of our jobs as writers, is to not make the assumption that everyone already knows, but instead take what we know and put it into our own words, put it into our own perspective, and put it out there for people to learn from. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. That has little to nothing to do with our guest today, but I did want to point out to everyone what's happening, what's going on, and I wanted to point out and use this as an example of just a passion that I have. I know that not everyone who listens to this show is an author, and I know sometimes that's the way I talk to people, as if they are an author. I think everyone should be, frankly. I don't think there's any reason why literally everyone couldn't write a book. And there are groups of people, hordes of people out there who would just, pull up the pitchforks and torches over that statement because there's a general attitude from we'll say a specific group out there. Actually, not specific. It's hard for me to label them, but there is a group of individuals in the world who just hate self-publishing. They blame it for everything. I wrote on Medium, I wrote a post called Self-Publishing Destroys the Universe, and it's a look at some of the articles that have come out in the past year or two that are just trashing self-publishing, trashing the very concept. It's those articles with clickbait headlines that say self-publishing is destroying literature. One of them was something along the lines of I'm dead broke as a traditional publisher, but self-publishing, no way, And you have to question the motives, the logic, the common sense. You have to question these things when you see headlines like this, because I can point to so many authors, thousands and thousands and thousands of authors, who are not only making their living. I can point to you a big group of authors, indie authors, self-published authors, who are making 6 figures a month. Now, money isn't always the motivation, right? And for most of us, I think we want to make a living from our work. But if you're going to be an author, there's something you really need to know up front, and that is you're probably not going to make a ton of money. But if you can do the work anyway because you love it, your chances of making money go up. So anyway, I don't want to soak up too much more time. We're already about 10 minutes in, and I don't want to deprive you of the experience of listening to our guest, which is Maggie Hogarth. Now, Maggie is the vice president of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. That's a guild that you can join if you meet the criteria. I'm looking into it. I think I technically meet the criteria. I've looked at some of it. I always go back and forth on these things because what is the benefit to me? But that's what we're going to find out. And there are some big names in there. It's a sort of badge of honor thing, I think, at this point. I don't know. And plus, you can get the benefits of, the wisdom of other members. So that's something. And that is worth considering. But I met Maggie at NINC, which I think is an organization you definitely should be a part of if you can, because of the impact that it has in the group of authors and publishers that come together every year. So this interview is shortly. It's just a couple of weeks after that event, and in the meantime, I had a whole lot of other things happen. So you're getting to hear a blast from the past, as it were. We'll call this something of a forgotten interview. I hate to say it, but it was there waiting for me. It was all queued up, and then the long and the short explanation is that this one required some editing because of some dropouts. So anytime there's editing involved, that interview gets moved a little. And Maggie, if you're listening, I am so sorry. I've owed you this one for a long time, so I really apologize for that. I try not to do things like that, but in the meantime, we also moved from our apartment in with my in-laws briefly, and into the RV full time, and then there were the holidays. I mean, there was a lot going on, so please forgive me. But I without further ado, here is Maggie Hogarth, and I know you'll love this interview. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Now today I'm talking to somebody. Now I had the privilege actually of meeting this person at NINC a couple of weeks ago. So probably more than a month ago by the time you get to hear this, audience. But I had a great experience at NINC, and part of the reason I had a great experience was because of this person. I'm talking today to Maggie Hogarth, who is the Vice President of the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. Did I say your last name right, Maggie?
Yeah, yes,
okay.
That's great.
Because I took a guess, and normally I ask ahead of time just to make sure. And so I'm glad that I got that right. So how are you? Thanks for being on the show.
I am good. I am cheerful as a.
Something.
I about blanked out on that one. I was going to say as a jaguar, that doesn't really work very well.
Cheerful as a jaguar is now a thing. That's now an official thing.
Awesome.
So you were. I was very glad to meet you. I know you had been talking with Dan Wood and the rest of the Draft Digital guys before I ever even came along, but. I was very happy to meet you. Your connection to an organization. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. But you're connected to an organization that I have followed for quite some time, and it's very interesting to me. And I am curious about sort of the inner workings of that whole organization. But I want to know about you too. So let's just start by talking about you a little.
Okay, where do you want to start? Big topic.
Now you're an author yourself, right?
Yes, I am an author and I am an artist.
Yes, you are an artist. I saw quite a bit of your artwork, plus your business cards. Each of your cards has like a different little design on it, and they were all very cool. Do you do your own covers and stuff?
Well, I do half and half. Some of my work I think works well with my own art, and some of it needs a style that I would much prefer to hire people to do.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Sometimes, I do all my covers, and that's kind of my thing too. Like I'm getting to a point now where I might want to start branching out and bringing in more people to do the work because, for one, it's an additional workload, which I really don't mind. But there's also this, that style. Like everything I touch is going to look pretty much the same. So it would be nice to kind of wow people every now and then.
Yeah, and I like, because I've been on the other side, I like being able to give work to artists who I know will do a good job and will, sock the money away and use it for good stuff. So
right, you support that community. That's good. You're a big fan of the indie community as well, right?
Yes, that I would call that my second home.
Really?
Yes. Okay. Yes. My first home, I will go ahead and say it, is the furry community. They've always been very good to me.
Okay. So. The furry community. Okay, now we have to talk about that. Because I am legitimately interested in that sort of the community itself. Because you guys, I don't know, there's a bond. There's a weird bond. And I don't mean to throw the word weird in there right away, but I do. But there's a unique bond, we'll say. And I don't know very many people who are into it. I do know a handful. So what's the story there?
Okay, well, so the story is, when I was a teenager, I went to my first comic shop, and my father went with me because he didn't want me to be exposed to, creepy older people who might, take
Traditional nerd. Yeah.
It was a very different community, back then.
Right.
So, so he went with me, and I found a comic there called Albedo, which was by Steve Galacci, and it was a hard science fiction comic, black and white indie. About it was heavy on politics and military stuff, about a community of animal people, and they were doing serious things and having like all these socio-political discussions, and it was fantastic. I loved it. And that was my gateway, I guess, into furry back then, was through before the internet, I'm sorry to say. Yes, that I am that old. That was my gateway into it. There was a lot of really great indie furry comics.
Wow.
And from there, and a lot of them had strong fantasy and science fiction themes. And a lot of science fiction and fantasy also has strong furry themes. I mean, we have the Dragon Riders of Pern and, the C.J. Cherry and, all the stuff. It's not like it's a separate thing.
Right.
So when I first started meeting with these people, it was very different than it is now because the internet changes everything.
Yeah.
But I find the community is just very friendly, and it doesn't take itself very seriously, which is kind of relaxing when you're around people who do take themselves very seriously all the time.
Yeah, it's true. And once you kind of get into the author realm, particularly the indie author realm, everyone takes themselves very seriously, and that can get
exhausting.
Tense.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is. So why now? How did indie authors become your second community? How'd that happen?
Well, because I had been trying to break into traditional publishing for 10 years, and I had a lot of very frustrating near misses that were kind of painful. And, the narrative, of course, especially before indie publishing was a thing, was that it's your fault. You didn't write a good enough book. You didn't shake enough hands. You didn't, it says something about the quality of your art that you weren't picked up and other people were.
Right.
And that's just harsh to hear year after year when you know for a fact that it's not always about you. I mean, how relaxing is that to admit? It's not always about you.
Right.
And so what I liked about indie, because for years and years and years, I had been building this community online with my artwork and with my live journal and whatever. And they all really, really, really wanted to read the stories I was talking about, and I couldn't get it to them, and it was increasingly frustrating. And so the ability to finally say, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just go on this journey together, and, we'll make it work or we won't, but at least we'll have the stories.
Right.
And, my readers at that time were like, you know what, we will happily support you. And off we went. And
that's very cool. You came in with a platform. That's very handy.
Yes.
Did you start off, or were the themes the same? I mean, were you writing about furries? I mean, were you writing something in sort of that universe, I guess?
Oh my gosh. So the first novel I wrote when I was like 10 was an interspecies romance tragedy between a unicorn and a dragon, and they had to be exiled, and they had these cultural conflicts. Now, mind you, I'm like 10 years old, so they're extremely naive treatment of these things, but it's all this. I reread it the other, like a year ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've always been interested in the same things.
Interesting.
It's always been culture, and it's always been the friction between cultures and unlike people, and making a community work despite that.
Yeah,
so,
that's very interesting. I mean, it's neat, really, to kind of to use a really lame term, but I mean, it is kind of neat to look back and see that there's a through line, that there's something you were interested in, even back at 10 years old, that carries through your work today. How much influence does that have today?
Oh, it's still there. And I'm sure it's a family thing. It's because I'm a first generation American daughter of immigrants who came here seeking political asylum. So now, I'm here. My parents, they don't know what Thanksgiving is. I go to school. I'm like, why aren't we celebrating Thanksgiving? They're like, oh my gosh, do we have to celebrate Thanksgiving? What does that mean? Let's go, I guess, buy something.
Yeah.
So all my life, I had been dealing with that kind of friction, and I guess it just made an impression.
Yeah. Now, you bring up your parents, and I did not mention this. It is in your bio, which anyone listening, you can read her bio on the show notes. But you're the daughter of 2 Cuban political exiles.
That's true.
That's just intriguing all on its own. That's like a premise for a novel right there.
Well, and I thought about it because my parents' story actually is kind of like a novel.
Yeah.
It's crazy because they met when they're 9 years apart. So they met when my mom was a young girl and my dad was a teenager at the same country club. And she always thought he was very handsome, in that way that little girls sometimes attach themselves to teen boys and think they're kind of cute. And so they met. And then the country had this huge revolution, and my dad fled and went to college in the States, and my mom had to flee to Mexico, and she took a very circuitous route back into the States.
Yeah.
And then they met at a wedding in the States for some of their relatives who were also expatriates, and they fell in love. And then they weren't living together, so they would write letters to each other. And then finally, when my mother got old enough, they got married. So it's like this huge, romance torn apart by war thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh!
How have you not written this already? Actually, I would be willing to bet $1 on an actual American dollar that you probably do write about this quite often. Like there are elements of this probably throughout a lot of your fiction, I'd bet.
Probably, but I don't think I'm ready to write the great Cuban American novel. It's tempting, but
you totally should. Yeah, you should. I mean, that's who else is going to write that? Come on.
True, very true.
And you can make it sci-fi or something. Just spice it up a little.
I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I know. That's the trouble I have too. I have a story of a family history that I think would make a very interesting story, and I sometimes I wonder if I'm the guy to write it. So maybe I'll outsource that. So okay, you've done all this. You've gotten involved in fiction, and you've been writing for quite a while. Then you wrote your first book at 10 years old. You said.
Yeah, well, that one's not fit for human consumption.
They never are, but hey, you did it, right?
I did, yes.
That's something you can tell everyone. You can just brag a little. So that leads to, so you've been doing this for quite a while. We're not going to put a number to it. You're welcome. So, but how did you become involved with the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America?
Oh, it was unavoidable, right? Because I loved science fiction and fantasy
right.
when I was younger, and there was no indie anything. It was all traditional publishing, and there was one way to do things, and it was the right way. And all the authors that I loved and admired were doing it this way. And of course, they would go to conventions, and there were even tales of swashbuckling because there was the Sephwa Musketeers at that time who would show up and do fencing demonstrations. And it was like the epitome of cool. And I'm like, I want to be one of those people. So that was my aspiration for the longest time, was to be one of those people. Yeah. And the moment I qualified, when I sold my third short story, I'm like, I'm in. And I was.
Excellent.
That was in 2002, 2004.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you were in the organization, and then what? You just decided, I'm going to take this thing over, or you're just going to slowly...
Oh my gosh, that sounds so Machiavellian.
Rubbing your hands together.
No, I'm going to vote myself a sparkle pony. No, what happened was I sold my third short story. Now, mind you, I started writing short fiction, which I hate writing. It's just, I know that it's brilliant and can be done wonderfully, and I have favorite short stories and, authors who do it, and I'm amazed by them, but it's not my thing. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I need to I need to get known so that an agent will pick me up and want to sell my novels, and that
Right.
means I have to write short stories. So I wrote short stories and got into the organization, and it just wasn't very relevant to me, I guess. And part of that was I was having increasing difficulty selling anything else.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had, crossed, I had reached a plateau, and I was hoping that, the career path would continue opening up, and instead it felt like I had hit a dead end. And at that point, I just gave up.
Yeah.
And then I let my membership lapse, and I did not come back again until after the Space Marine debacle.
No. Okay. I think I vaguely know the Space Marine debacle.
The Space Marine debacle. So, up until the point where I rejoined, most of the money that I made by serializing fiction online
Right.
in return for donations and subscriptions. This was before Patreon, so I did it manually, either through PayPal or through people mailing me in the mail, like checks and stuff like that. Yeah. So one of the things I serialized was a military science fiction novel called Spots the Space Marine, and it was it ran for like a year and a half, and I really enjoyed writing. It was a very different tack for me, but I love military science fiction, so I felt like it was a great chance to dip my toe in the waters of something I'd always enjoyed. Yeah. But after I finished serializing it, I did what I did with all my serials, and I put together an ebook and print and audio, well, like not audio for that one, editions, and I put them online. And then it had been online very briefly when I got this letter that Games Workshop, which is a game company in the UK, had talked to Amazon and told them I was infringing on their copyright of the word Space Marine. No, their trademark, sorry. And that they wanted my book taken down. And Amazon said, okay, and did so.
Right. Which Amazon does without ever questioning it.
Well, they would argue it's not the job of their legal department to, make rulings or whatever. So whatever. And so what it basically came down to was this company, which is notorious for doing ridiculous things like this, was trying to enforce a foreign trademark with a very narrow description. They only had it for board games. In the UK. So they were trying to say that their UK trademark for the use of this phrase in board games should apply to my novel being sold from the US.
Right.
Which obviously is not valid. But, because Amazon didn't want to fight with them about it, they just said yes. And then we had the whole internet erupt in outrage, which was appropriate. And then Amazon came and put it back up. And so that was good.
Good.
Yeah. So, and then the president of SciFi said something about it in response to, I think it was Jerry Pournelle and Elizabeth Moon, who had been discussing it on the private forums about, should we say anything about this? We've noticed this, and it seems like something that would touch on all of us, and that's, I think, what inspired SciFi to say something about it. And after they did, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I should go check this out again and see what's going on over here. So that's when I rejoined.
Yeah, so they stood up for a former member. Mm-hmm. Right. So okay. So then you're back in. I could see that. I mean that I would do the same. I kind of want to join now just because they did that. That's actually very cool that they went to the trouble to actually stand up and say something, because that's a problem. I myself have had 2 books pulled from Amazon because of someone claiming copyright over my work.
Oh my gosh!
So it's a big hassle.
Yes,
and it's scary when you've got something that you put that much effort into, and someone claims it. So good on them. I'm glad to hear that. So that sounds like it's a sort of side benefit of the organization. What are some of the big benefits of being a part of SciFi?
Oh, everyone asks me why should I join?
Yeah,
and I can only tell them my reasons, right? Because everyone's got a different reason. I know someone who says she joins for the food because we put on a fantastic suite at Worldcon for members, and you can eat all day there, and so you can save a lot of money by not having to eat out. But
Okay.
that's her thing. My thing is, writing gets kind of lonely.
Yeah.
You're stuck at a desk and, walking or standing or sitting, depending on who you are. And you're in this own little world, and then you come out of it, and now all of a sudden, you feel like not only have I not seen other human beings' face for 3 hours, I have all these issues now that I need to deal with that I really want to vent about or just get other opinions about. And so for me, the value of SciFi is that it's an organization of my peers who are working specifically in my genre. Yeah. So I can discuss with them, and they have the mutual context of we all get this, and so we all have useful things to share with each other about it. So that's the reason I stick around is because I like the people, I like the community, and I like fostering that sense of community. There are lots of other benefits. We were putting in a lot of promotional stuff for people who want to reach readers better. So we're working on helping authors with discoverability. We're always doing advocacy, legal and community-wise. We have our legal and our medical funds, which help people in need if they have legal problems or a medical issue that's keeping them from writing. So we have a lot of services that are also, I think, not just useful from a personal perspective, but I think are a good thing to support just to enable your community. I really feel like we should be tending the garden. And so if you can give, $90 to SciFi every year so that we can help other people and give grants to, we give grants to things like high school clubs, science fiction writing clubs so that, kids can learn how to write and have some support. And, we do all sorts of stuff like that. So I think it's important to support that kind of thing.
I agree. And there are things. There's a lot to that organization, and I've heard about it all my life, practically. I mean, I've known several people who've become members. I was never able to become a member for the longest time. I probably could on short stories. Never even thought about that. But that brings up the point. Like, it's fairly recent that indie authors could become part of SciFi, right?
That's right. It was 2014, 2012, something like that.
What brought about that change?
Internal agitation.
Yeah.
Right. So we had a committee, which I was part of, for people who were self-publishing already, who were members, but we were also self-publishing.
Right.
And we were very agitated that you could not qualify to join as a indie, even though most of the indie authors we knew were making tremendous amounts more money than a lot of our other peers. So we said, this is ridiculous. We need we need to have the community actually reflect professional science fiction and fantasy writing, which right now, people are putting money on the table, putting dinner on the table with this particular way of doing it. So we have to get with the times. And I will proudly say we are, as far as I know, the only organization so far that also accepts crowdfunding.
Yeah.
As a legitimate path to qualify. So if you are an indie who, runs a successful Kickstarter, you can't get into NINC, but you can get into SciFi. We value that. So
that's very cool. I mean, yeah, that's true. I don't know of any others that are doing that. And the threshold, I think, is fairly reasonable with you guys. What as far as crowdfunding, I mean, what would you have to be able to bring in order to qualify?
I believe it's $3,000.
Okay, yeah.
In a calendar year.
Okay. I felt like that was very reasonable. Like I feel like most authors, if they're good at what they do, and they have a platform, could bring $3,000 in through crowdsourcing.
Yeah, and I don't think when we put together the the guidelines, what I used to jokingly tell people is, I want to make sure I could qualify.
Yeah.
Because I've done so many weird things to make money that I figure if I could qualify through any one of these like weird scenarios, we're doing good, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's
that,
cool. Yeah. I kind of had given up hope on being a member. I'm going to be honest with you. So now I'm rethinking that. I gave up hope right around the time that Stephen Gould became president.
yeah.
Not because of him. I like him, and he and I have been in contact with each other over the years. But I had kind of just thrown up my hands and given up hope around that time because there were articles sort of circulating, basically saying why indies will never be a part of the organization, and we need to go get real publishing contracts and that sort of thing. So
Well, and it was very discouraging. There were
Yeah.
some dark moments, and in fact, I'm very grateful. There was I guess this is a tradition, the rage quit that you
Yeah,
everyone feels impelled to rage quit stuff at least once. But
I've heard that.
there was a point, and I was one of the few people left on the self-publishing committee who was working for this stuff, where I felt like it was pointless and that there was nothing I could do to bring about the cultural change that we needed to propel our membership into this era where they have so many choices. And two former presidents called me on the phone. They looked me up in the membership directly. I was like shocked. I'm like, wow, someone has my phone number. But they called me on the phone and they said, please, we need you. You have to stick this out. And I was so touched by that. I mean, it was tremendous. So yeah, I did stay, and the committee, we did it, and I still think that's something to be proud of.
So is there any division at this point when it comes to this topic?
I don't know that that's division as much as inertia, because the organization has been run so long by volunteers who were doing nothing but traditional publishing that they don't. It's not that they want to deride it. They just don't even think of it.
Right.
It doesn't occur to them. So the thing that we're fighting is not so much, active antagonism as it is just ignorance, which makes sense. And I think we're making headway with that. But educating people, it takes time.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's still a pretty pervasive attitude in the sort of general industry, not really against indie authors, but sort of looking at us sideways,
Yeah.
And it's interesting, and I've noticed this a lot. When I talk to traditionally published authors, I recognize at some point that we are having very different conversations about the exact same thing. Like, just completely different interpretations of the world around us. So that's going to take a while to overcome, I think.
Well, and the truth is, we are small business people.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of terrifying to think of your art as something that is a small business that could fail.
Yeah.
And I think part of the challenge with the introduction of indie to the equation is that we're now asking, generations of artists to confront the very scary possibility that they're not going to be able to make it financially as a business because of something that they create, which is
Right.
kind of harsh. So when I talk to traditional authors, what I mostly hear is I like being on a team. I like being taken care of. I like not having to worry about a lot of these things.
Yeah.
And I know where that's coming from, and I understand it. And I think we're just very used to not thinking of ourselves as business people, and that transition is difficult.
Yeah, I talk to people all the time that still hold on to that sort of, I don't even want to call it old school thinking, because it's still the current thinking. Like the notion that if I write a book and it gets published, I'm going to be able to retire to an island somewhere, raise goats, whatever it is your ambitions happen to be. Probably not raising goats, but I'm going to be able to do whatever it is I want to do because I'll have people taking care of all the stuff I would, I don't want to worry about. And I don't think that's the case necessarily in traditional publishing anymore either, unless you happen to be a unicorn. You're
Yeah.
a rock star. So
Well, the truth is, it was never true for
most
almost
people, yeah.
for most people. For 90% of the people, they couldn't really afford to have, their agents didn't treat them as well as they could have
Right.
because they're busy paying attention to the bestsellers who are making them the most of their money. And, the publishers are doing the same thing. And it's, the sad truth is when I look at my own organization and I ask myself how many of my peers in this professional writing organization are making a living without a second job or a spouse or a family to help them, the answer is almost none of them.
Yeah.
And that's always been true.
I think that's kind of sad. I mean, because, okay, let's just contrast this. I've probably talked to 15 authors today who just roll out of bed and do their writing and then promote it. They market it themselves. They do all that work, but that's the only work they do. And that, to me, there's something wrong with a system where I've gotten a publishing contract, I have an agent, I have a publisher, I have an editor, I have all the things that people claim you have to be successful in this, but I have to go work at my second job at Target or something to keep my family fed. There's something wrong with that.
That's true. But to be fair, people have different priorities.
That's true too.
And some writers, they don't care as much about the money as they care about prestige or awards or doing their own thing. So,
And I admit, and I'm going to just be open about this, I am real bad about defaulting to it's the money that matters, for your success. I'm real bad about it, so I'm going to overcome that because there are. I mean, I am to an extent. The money is not the driving force in my career either, but it is the way I keep score. So we'll just leave it at that. So okay, we're running out of time, which is unfortunate because I think I kind of want to go back to the furry conversation. And
back to the furry.
Yeah, maybe later we'll do a whole episode on furry.
Awesome.
But I'm glad we got to connect. And by the way, I wanted to say earlier because you talk, you do art. I actually sat next to Maggie at one of the talks at NINC, and she has her notebook out, and this is how she takes notes. I mean, she's doodling, but her doodles are like. This is the kind of thing that I have to sit down and I spend like an hour doing an illustration. She's just casually jotting this thing down, She's very good. So anyway, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're very busy with your prestigious role at SIFWA.
Well, it was a pleasure. I had a great time meeting you and the other guys from Draft to Digital. So
those guys they are good. They're good at what they do. That's the only Draft to Digital plug I'll do in the whole episode. But thank you so much for taking the time. Everybody, if you stick around, you'll be able to hear me do a wrap-up where I'll probably mention Draft Digital again. I'm just kind of like that. And you can also find all the information you could ever possibly want about Maggie Hogarth on her website at mcahogarth.org. And there's also a link to her live journal, and because that's always so long, I'm just going to put that link in the show notes where you can go find it. You're definitely going to want to check that out. Links to her author page on Amazon. All that stuff will be there. You can find her on Twitter. Maggie, thanks so much for being a part of the show, and I can't wait till we get a chance to chat again.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right. Take care, everybody. Hang around. All right. That was my interview with Maggie Hogarth. I think you got something useful out of that. You had to. She's an amazing person. I love talking to her. She was so much fun at NINC. She just went right along with our craziness, the Draft to Digital craziness, the Wordslinger craziness. She just parked right next to us. And we went to a restaurant that was recommended to us. And I don't know how everyone else felt about it, but it was supposed to be really good, authentic Mexican food. And it was not. So, and I don't know how everyone else felt about it. I do know that we had to keep one of our party away from the margaritas. There came a point where we had to end the margarita madness. But anyway, all that said and done, if you get a chance, you definitely need to check out Maggie's all of her work. Actually, go to her website, dig into all the links that you're going to find in the show notes. Find out all you can about her. she is incredible, and I've really enjoyed. We've actually chatted quite a bit since this interview. I'm happy and proud to say, and she's been a lot of fun. So definitely check out her work. If you are interested in Nink, I'll try to put a link to that in the show notes as well. There are minimums. There is a threshold you have to meet in order to become a member, but you can attend. I believe you can attend. It's like a sort of limited pass, and if you can get to this event and go to even just some of the after hours stuff, I can tell you from experience, it is worth your time and money. It is definitely worth it. We hung out for a week with authors, publishers, service providers, for the indie author industry in particular, and it was just I could see that as being a life-changing event for an indie author. And there were a couple of really, high-profile indie authors there that we got to hang out with and I got to meet. So, very cool. It was great meeting everyone, and Maggie in particular. So, definitely check that out. And since I've got your ear, if you would like to help support the Word Slinger podcast, first of all, I'm stupid grateful for you even thinking that. But you can do that. Here's a couple of ways. One, moral support more than anything, but also discovery support. If you'll go on if you'll go on iTunes, search for Wordslinger Podcast, and leave a review. Give me 4 or 5 stars if that's your inclination. Write something nice. Tell me and the world what it is you've discovered through the show. What value you've found in the show. If you'll do that, it does quite a few things for me, actually. One, it does help make the show more discoverable, so that people. And I'm sorry, by the way, for all the road noise. I'm in the RV full time now. It's early morning still, and we're kind of close to at this point we're kind of close to a highway in the park we're in, and at this time of day it's like the Grand Prix out there. So all that said and all that aside, forgive the noise, but if you would go and rate and rank the show, what it does is help me help others discover the show. It helps people stumble upon it. But when they see the reviews, they if you've written something that says, I love this show because whatever your reason happens to be. Maybe it's you love the fact that I focus on the stories of individuals. Maybe you found some help in the marketing aspect of your business, whatever that business happens to be. Maybe you were introduced to a talent that you now follow and appreciate. Maybe you just like the tone of my voice. Whatever it is, that one comment could impact the life of someone. And that's the point of the show. I have a commitment. My commitment is, my purpose in life is to tell good stories that serve God and serve others. And I can do that best if people help me. This is a community effort. So the goal of the show, and as is the goal of my life, is to provide a story that helps shape the lives of other people. So there you go. If you'll go leave a review on iTunes, you can also do that on Stitcher. You can do that on Google Play. Anywhere fine podcasts are found, you can do that, and I would appreciate that. That helps the show quite a bit. But it also helps me because hearing feedback is important. I wrote an article on Medium recently called "Who Do They Say I Am," and it has a slightly Christian slant. So I tried to buffer that because I know there are people who will tune out wisdom as soon as they learn that it comes from Christ. I don't know why. I listen for wisdom no matter who it comes from. Even the most vile people can sometimes have a germ of wisdom within them, even if it's just don't do what they do. So you should always be open-minded about wisdom. But all that said, the point of the article was how we can determine whether we're on point with the way we personally view ourselves, our sort of branding, if you will, and whether or not we're projecting the persona that we think we are, and how to tell. And feedback is one of the ways we do that. And sometimes we get negative feedback, and sometimes we have to look at how that can shape us. How can we use that in a positive way? And sometimes we have to reach out to people and ask them for feedback, and that was the point of that post. So that's what I'm asking for. I want your feedback. I want to know what you're liking about the show. I tend to tune out the negative stuff, I'll be honest with you. You can criticize the show if you like. I understand. You can criticize me. You can criticize my writing. I've had people do that. But I've just come to a point in my life where I don't care about the negative stuff. I'm caring less and less about it. I'm obsessing less and less about it. I have an email in my inbox right now that is definitely TLDR, but it is nothing but criticism of me and my work, and I just don't know that I'm going to read it. I haven't decided yet. I may read it to see if I can pull out those little pearls of wisdom, as we said, and keep my mind open to the wisdom. But it's kind of tough when you're being slammed for 5 or 6 pages. I'm telling you, man, some people do not like you, no matter what kind of good you try to do in the world. It's just the way life is. Another way you can support the show, and I'm dragging this on, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for taking all your time. But if you would like to support the show financially, you can do that. Go to wordslingerpodcast.com. You can click on the Patreon button, and if you would just be as generous as you feel you should be, whatever your heart leads you to offer. Patreon is a way for you to continuously support the show with a small donation. Basically, you become a patron. Back in the day, in the Renaissance and the eras surrounding it, artists were supported by patrons, and it's a time-honored sort of tradition, but if people appreciated the work of an artist, they would support him financially. So you had the Medicis, I think, were patrons of Da Vinci for a time. The Schwartzes and the other. I've lost everything I've ever learned about Leonardo da Vinci. For some reason, just went right on my head. But the point there is, you can be a patron of the arts, and this specific art, if you like. I'd love for you to support the show. I recently, and by recently, within the past several months, I interviewed Michael Bunker, and he has a philosophy that I really enjoy, and I subscribe to, which is, if you are enjoying an artist's work, support it any way you can. Buy copies of their book. Buy copies of their art, submit, donate or whatever to their Patreon campaigns, chip in on their Kickstarters. You don't have to do it with every single artist, but try to help where you can, because that art is meant to go out and influence and change the world and make it a better place. And this is not artists, me in particular, whining about dollars. It's about finding ways to support the art that we're doing. No one owes it to us. We're not entitled to it. We still have to do the work. We still have to figure things out. We still have to learn. We still have to grow. But we also still have to offer you the opportunity to be a part of it. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not about supporting the artist financially just because they don't want to have a, quote, real job. It's about helping artists and participating in what they're creating so that you're a part of changing the world. Does that make sense? So that's my philosophy in a nutshell. I donate to several Patreons. It's kind of ironic. Probably if I pulled in everything I'm donating to everyone else, I wouldn't really have to ask anyone to support the show. But the show does fine, whatever. If you don't have the money to give, I totally understand, and it's acceptable. But if you feel led to do it, I would appreciate it. So, all that said, I've rambled on quite a bit in this episode. I'm sorry about that. I get that way every now and then, especially on these late days, the ones that I do last minute. I hope that you are enjoying the Wordslinger podcast. I hope you're enjoying the art I produce, this podcast, my books, the blog posts, the posts on Medium, the stuff I post on Facebook. It's all meant to tell a story that serves my God, serves my friends, my family, those I love, which includes you. And I don't know what your stance is on anything. I don't know what you believe. I don't know what your faith is. I don't know if you are agnostic, atheist, Muslim. I don't mean to group those things together as being the same thing, but I don't know what your personal stance is, but I do know what I believe, and I do know who I serve, and that's one of the purposes of my life. And so I'm very glad and very grateful that you're here taking part in that. So here's to doing something really good and positive in the world. Take care of yourselves. Thanks so much for tuning in. Tune in again next week. We're going to have another episode, another great interview. I can't wait for you to hear it. And I hope that your story is remarkable and amazing. And have a great day.
Word Slinger.